So here to convene our discussion on the FAA reauthorization and hydrogen aviation in the USA generally is the Washington Post transportation reporter, Laurie Aratani. Laurie writes about innovation in the transportation sector and how new technology is changing the way people get where they're going, which is obviously what we're all talking about today. She grew up in California and graduated from Boston University, and she says that she learned the real meaning of cold weather while in Boston, which is something I can attest to as a former Bostonian myself. So Laurie, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Please introduce us to the discussion and the panelists who are joining you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Earlier this year, the U.S. Congress passed legislation, as you mentioned, that will fund the Federal Aviation Administration for the next 5 years. Tucked into that more than 1,000-page bill were several provisions aimed at supporting the development of hydrogen aviation. But as policymakers and those in the industry know, the hard work is only just beginning. And as many of our panelists have noticed throughout today's sessions, a whole host of things, regulations, certification requirements, infrastructure must be put into place before this industry can really take off. Much of the responsibility for developing that roadmap here in the US falls to the FAA. So today, I am so pleased to welcome experts from government and private industry to help walk us through the next steps needed to introduce hydrogen-propelled aircraft into the US aviation system. We have Catalin Fotache, Chief Scientist and Technical Advisor to the Federal Aviation Administration. We have Adrienne Schweer, who had government affairs for Joby Aviation, which has really been doing some pioneering work in hydrogen-propelled aircraft. Ben Gould wears many hats at the Department of Energy. Among them, he is head of the Interagency Hydrogen Taskforce. Now, before we get started, I know that I have questions, and I'm sure that the audience has lots of questions. I'd love to give each of you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe a little bit about what interests you or intrigues you most about this topic. Catalin, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction and the name pronunciation. I've worked for about better part of 25 years with United Technologies Raytheon, mostly Pratt & Whitney. I come from a background of propulsion, jet engines. I joined the FAA relatively recently in February, end of January of this year. And I've had the great pleasure of becoming responsible for two of the key sections in the reauthorization bill response. I think these are extremely exciting times for hydrogen and for other means that we're looking at in order to enable decarbonization, in order to improve the efficiency while maintaining the safety of flight. At the FAA, I work Air 20, the Office of Senior Technical Expert. So my number one concern is safety for introduction of hydrogen. That's all.
Laurie, you're muted.
Sorry, Adrienne. You'd think I'd learn how to use Zoom by now. Adrienne, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. And it's been exciting to watch different elements of this conference and see all the passion for hydrogen aviation and all the expertise that are here today. I am with Joby Aviation. We're an electric aviation company that this year announced some new exploration and research in hydrogen electric aviation or hybrid powertrains. We're really excited to be part of this ecosystem in a small way compared to so many others that have been working for a really long time, and eager to be sitting next to both of these two experts who are leading the field and paving the path for us to get certified on things like this.
Great, Ben.
Also, thank you for the introduction, and hello, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to all you people around the world. I cut my teeth starting in hydrogen aviation, actually. So I've been working in hydrogen for 15 plus years. I started at the US Naval Research Laboratory working on unmanned hydrogen aviation, building long endurance UAVs that had capability far beyond battery powered vehicles in terms of range and sight over the horizon. And so it's just been a wonderful journey to watch this. I'm so excited that we're moving away from unmanned into manned aviation, where the safety is so important. That FAA has highlighted. Always been a dream of mine to actually maybe someday step on a hydrogen powered aircraft and fly somewhere. That would just be an incredible moment for our industry and for everyone, for the world. So that's where I got cut my teeth doing that. Maybe some of the first and only people to actually maybe even crashed hydrogen powered airplanes during their development. And I did everything soup to nuts, from building fuel cells by hand to installing tanks to working with fledgling industries trying to get this stuff stood up. Now I'm at the Department of Energy. I'm a technology manager there, focusing on high TRL prototyping activities, mostly around heavy duty trucks, but we watch all the transportation sectors, including aviation. I'm also co-chair of the Hydrogen Interagency Taskforce, where there's a whole of government approach towards hydrogen, and that's how we get connected to the FAA Authorization Act. So we're here to support. We're an S&T organization, so we want to make sure these decisions and safety and innovations that are happening in the commercial space, they're grounded in good scientific fact and reasoning, and sort of a third party government arbiter to look at these things. But it was great to be a leader on the bench scientifically at the lab, but really it's the innovation out there in the ecosystem of commercially. You guys are the innovators doing the amazing work and try to actually get this thing off the ground, literally.
See, I told you all that he wears many hats at DOE. So Catalin, I'm going to put you on the hot seat because I know you have a big job ahead of you. The FAA reauthorization bill gives you some guidance for next steps, but there's a lot there. So can you talk about what your approach is to tackling such an immense task?
Yes, thank you. So we've enrolled Ben to help. But let me just say a few words about the reauthorization. First of all, one of the first things I learned is that reauthorization, there's a difference between reauthorization and appropriation. The reauthorization is a mandate, which we will execute. But to do the actual work, I think you need the other noun. Hydrogen appears in no fewer than 5 sections in the reauthorization, not all of which I'm responsible for. So in 956, which is Advanced Propulsion System Regulation, it is about certification of power plants, hydrogen power plants, so how we streamline and enable that. 1017, which is Centers of Excellence for Alternative Jet Fuels. There's a mention of hydrogen that FAA needs to continue to do research for alternatives to jet fuels, including hydrogen. 1020, which is Aviation Fuel Systems, which covers broadly coordinating all activities for new fuels. That includes hydrogen, even though it's not specifically mentioned. And then the 2 sections that I am responsible for, which are, I believe, the larger ones in terms of mandate, namely 1019, which is the Hydrogen Aviation Strategy. And the Hydrogen Aviation Strategy mandates the FAA to come up with a research needs for safe introduction of hydrogen in aviation within a year of the date of enactment, which gives us until May. 1019 also asked the FAA to create a subcommittee to advise the Secretaries of Transportation, DOE, and the administrator on issues related to this strategy. 1109, which is FAA leadership in hydrogen aviation, is to develop a viable path for certification. So that is creating a roadmap for certification. So if you give me another 5 minutes, my plan was to tell you a little bit about the roadmap, because the roadmap is about to get public, hopefully within soon, a week or 2, which is one of the key deliverables in here.
Okay, would you want to, Adrienne, go ahead.
Lori,
Yeah.
before he jumps in, I want to add a couple things for our audience that I think are important. And our friend Todd from ZeroAvia wasn't able to join us, but he was quite instrumental in helping shape a lot of this. But the provisions that Dr. Fotache was mentioning were strongly bipartisan and passed in the FAA reauthorization bill. So as we look to a new political environment and some changes across the board, these are elements, important elements, especially around the hydrogen strategy and the certification pathway that he leads, that we believe have longevity and won't be walked back or changed too much. Like, they were really strongly bipartisan and passed in a bipartisan way this year.
Oh, that's great. That's such a great point, because that was going to be my question. I know there's been a lot of investment here, and I think the most frustrating thing is when you're starting on this road is when the money goes away, right? The money's there, it goes away. It's hard to get consistency. But I know aviation, transportation has really been a bipartisan issue, judging from getting this bill across the line. So that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. Ben, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd also add, the missions of the FAA and the missions of DOE, they're enduring, right? Every American wants safe air travel. Every American wants energy security and prosperity, right? So I think that's just important to remember as well. The missions and the purpose of our organizations are enduring for the American people.
I think that someone had brought up how government can be siloed, right? And it sounds like Ben and Catalin have a roadmap for hopefully working together to use to not reinvent the wheel, right? To parlay all this knowledge and put it to good use.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, especially with hydrogen, it's going to take a whole of government approach, and that's really the mandate of the Hydrogen Interagency Task Force. If you want to learn more, I'm not going to do a deep dive on what it is, but you can remember this one. It's hydrogen.gov. There's a webinar, you can view it about the purpose of it, but it's really to help break down some of those silos and make sure we're aligned, because hydrogen touches many, many different agencies. In my agency, we're looking at making cornerstone investments in hydrogen production through the Hydrogen Hub. We do S&T development all the way from the very fundamental materials development in my office, all the way up to first of its kind prototype demonstrations. But all that, feeds into a larger ecosystem, and some of that infrastructure, if there are hydrogen pipelines, PHMSA has to be involved, commerce, agriculture as feedstocks if we're looking at sustainable aviation fuel. So it's really a multifaceted approach, but all the government has a stake in it, and we want to make sure that there's a place that convene under that and make sure we understand each agency's issues, we're not duplicating efforts, and we can move forward with a coherent strategy.
That's great. And I know, Catalin, you've got a roadmap that you want to share, so do you want to go ahead and tell us about that?
Well, so when I mentioned that one of the key provisions of the reauthorization is the creation of a viable path for certification. So as a first step, what we did is we created a roadmap, which is a high-level plan for safe introduction of aviation on aircraft. It doesn't yet include airports, which is a key element, but what we need to do in terms of regulation, gap analysis, and so forth should be covered by this. So if I can just see if I can share this. Is this working?
Looks like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so why are we doing this? I know we're talking about a congressional mandate, but the reality is the FAA is first of all responsive to the American public, and it is responsive to applicant needs. And we currently have applicants that are proposing hydrogen propulsion. So we need to be able to tackle that. But from a public perspective, we've all seen pictures like this of what is needed to do in order to achieve 2050 decarbonization. The US believes there will be enough SAF. SAF is sustainable aviation fuel to supply aviation. The view from Europe is slightly different. Europe thinks that, yeah, there may be enough SAF as long as we use hydrogen through power to liquids to create that SAF. Vast amounts, as you can see here, which means cost. As the previous panel indicated, there's a significant cost going to full kerosene from water electrolysis. The Reauthorization Act produced our mandate. And as I said earlier, we have currently applicants, and you might recognize some of these. Yeah, Joby is there with their first 500 plus nautical mile flight on hydrogen, ZeroAvia, Airbus, and with one of their 4 demonstrators are planned. And then at the bottom is Fokker, who plans to reimagine itself as a hydrogen aircraft OEM. Our roadmap is a high-level plan. It is not a regulation. It is not an advisory circular. It is a plan on how to identify the gaps and respond to them. And in order to do this, we focus on a few guiding principles. First of all, it's about safety. Secondly, we don't want to reinvent the wheel if not necessary. This is key, using a performance-based approach as opposed to a prescriptive one. So we don't want to tell people in incredible detail what means of compliance they will want to use, but rather what outcomes of safety are expected in order to be certified. And then finally, derive requirements from type certification regulations. So we plan to use the existing CFR certification regulations, 21, 23, 25, 33, and so forth, and their subparts. As of today, and this is a picture that we've pioneered not long ago, it's sort of akin to the technology readiness levels that NASA and industry is using, and it's a certification readiness. And it is our opinion that currently, from a certification as well as a technology maturity level, fuel cells for non-propulsive applications are the farthest along. Fuel cells for propulsive applications, the kind that Joby and ZeroAvia are working on, are not far behind. And hydrogen power gas turbines are in a somewhat curious state. They are farthest behind in terms of investment, effort, announced prototypes, and so forth. And at least as a gas turbine person, for me, that is a little surprising, because that technology has actually might actually be a little less difficult to mature than everything that has to do with electrical motors and so forth. We've started an effort to look in detail at gap analysis. So there is a certification oversight board. We're working closely with the EASA and with the UK CAA and Brazil and Transport Canada to have a harmonized view into where we see gaps in current regulation. And I know the part that you cannot read is on purpose, so you cannot read it because it is changing. But basically, it is looking at FAA regulations, EASA regulations, identifying gaps, producing recommendations, and coming up with research needs. The key thing about this roadmap is looking at hazards. And hydrogen, I'm going to say this again at the end, that hydrogen needs to be treated with respect. Hydrogen is different than other fuels, and while it can be made safe, it is not intrinsically a fuel that is safer than kerosene. So fire and explosion is the #1 need, and in particular, we're worried about leak detection, dispersion, and control. And other materials, embrittlement, diffusion at altitude, fuel same membrane durability, flow systems freeze. Hydrogen will freeze everything except helium. And then crash worthiness, and in particular for proposals that have to do with helicopters or multi-copters with rotors, how do we ensure crash worthiness of tanks, especially for liquefied hydrogen tanks that need to have high gravimetric efficiency, therefore skinny materials, they need to be tested, they need to be verified. We do have a plan of execution of the roadmap that basically is putting us on having airworthiness requirements harmonized by the end of 26. And what we do know from the authorization mandate is that we have a report to Congress, 3 years of enactment. So May of 2027. And activities will continue: safety research, updating means of compliance, and training, workforce development. This actually does mirror to some, this is taken from one of the European Union's SRIAs, Strategic Research Initiative. So you can see in terms of their view for technology development, we're sort of aligned with 2035 large prototypes, and then 2050 actual introduction at the larger scale. Now, keep in mind that in the meanwhile, we are treating each and every applicant, and we're handling them through special conditions. So that doesn't mean that you'll have to wait until 2035. And just 3 points. At least my belief is that hydrogen is here already and is likely to stay. Whether it grows from the lower end of the spectrum, or it makes a big entry at the medium scale, where we will need infrastructure, we'll need Dr. Gould to deliver on his promises. We have to treat it with respect. So I don't want to scare anybody with this, but the Hindenburg did not explode because of the canopy. Okay, it had to do with the stuff inside. As a combustion person, I'm quite painfully aware hydrogen was one of the first things that we tested. And what I've shown here are just initial steps. I think, just to echo what Lori said earlier, the hard work just begins. So thank you. I hope I didn't bore you too much.
No, that's great. Thank you. That gives us a real sense of the roadmap. You've got some dates in there. So I think the let's see, what is it? You learn the trick of DC, which is they give you the task, but they don't give you the money. But maybe this helps with that. You know, one of the things that we talked about in sort of our pre-panel discussion is we talked about I guess the potential for hydrogen to be really transformative for aviation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I think, Catalin, you talked a little bit about that, but Adrienne or Ben, or even Catalin, if you want to weigh in on what it could mean for, you know, maybe a greener, cleaner travel.
I can start, Ben, and you take over after. For the audience, I think it's important to know that, like, America is undergoing a hydrogen renaissance. It is a very exciting thing. The bipartisan infrastructure bill's enactment of the hydrogen hubs will lead us to stronger domestic production, more capable storage, and exploration of new use cases. Of the hydrogen hubs, only a couple of them have aviation in their mission, and it's not a core priority within their mission. And, you know, a few years ago, when the Department of Energy rolled out a hydrogen strategy, aviation was more of a footnote than a stronghold. And I think, thanks to people like Ben, we have seen a transition there and an understanding of how hydrogen can unlock lots of modes of transportation. It can be a really important tool for many elements of our country and economy, but it has quite catalytic potential in the aviation sector, both for performance, for cost, especially given the domestic production capabilities, and then for the part that I care the most about, which is the fusion of quiet and sustainable aviation transportation. You know, being 3 times more performant per kilo is pretty transformative, and being able to convert that energy in a lot of our hydrogen electric systems twice as efficiently as jet fuel makes it have 6 times the specific energy potential of a lot of current propulsion. And while Joby and me are deeply passionate about electric aviation and all of its capabilities and what it unlocks on noise profile and you know, shorter range, under 100 nautical mile routes, it needs a hybrid powertrain in the near future before batteries are more performant to have longer range and higher payloads. And we think hydrogen is that perfect partner. So I'm excited about the way that the US is investing. I think we have allies across the globe. Many of you are on the call today that are also doubling down on hydrogen production storage, but particularly focusing on aviation potential. And I think the US didn't start there, but is getting there thanks to people like Dr. Gould. And if we want to continue to lead the globe in aviation and in safe aviation, we're going to need to get even more committed to this workflow. I think you all might have gotten like a sneak peek of Catalin's work in a way that most people haven't, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool for me. But equally, Dr. Gould, I'll kick it over to you to share a little bit about what the Department of Energy is doing in hydrogen and where it intersects with aviation, because it's pretty new and really exciting.
Yeah, and I think also I'll try to touch on some of how it can be transformative. Like just for me, when I think about that question, what am I most excited about hydrogen aviation? And this might be like sound like a really silly thing, but actually, like after this talk, I have to go drive to DCA to get on an airplane. And when you park in the parking lot, what's the first thing that happens? You smell the airport, right? You can smell like diesel fuel. I'm excited to be able to go to an airport someday and maybe not smell the airport, right? Or maybe not even hear some of the airport, right? So we can just make things, better for that and the surrounding communities. Like personally, that's what I'm just very excited about in the transformational, part of hydrogen. Hydrogen is also just a great energy carrier, right? It has its only emission through either a fuel cell is, water, and through a gas turbine is water and maybe, some NOx, but there are other, emission treatment potentials for that. But, it's just lower emissions to our surrounding communities, to our skies. So I'm just very excited to be, moving forward along this progress that we see in terms of energy. And that progress has been historic in nature, right? So if you just look at sort of the age of energy, you can actually plot this looking at what the ratio of hydrogen is to the carbon atom in our fuels. We started with very high carbon intensity fuels with wood, moved through coal. Now we're sort of in a natural gas methane age where we have 4 hydrogen atoms for every 1 carbon atom. And then the next transition would be hydrogen, where we just have hydrogen without a carbon atom. So it's exciting to see that progress as we've sort of been moving forward through time. What we're doing at the Department of Energy is, in my office, I work in the hydrogen fuel cell technology office. We work on that sort of S&T and development space. So we're doing a lot of development in electrolyzer technology. This is all outlined in we have a national hydrogen roadmap. We have a couple foundational documents at DOE, so you can review those along with the hydrogen liftoff reports out of the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, which I also support. That's not my home office, but I work with them very closely. They're the ones administering the hydrogen hubs. And so you can see these documents outline, some of the research priorities and end uses that hydrogen make a lot of sense in. Hydrogen is a little tricky to talk about because it can be used in so many different applications, everything from, making steel to flying airplanes, right? So when we focus just on aviation for a second and the hubs, we're at this really hydrogen renaissance that Adrienne mentioned, which is a great, time for hydrogen. It's very, very exciting. We have these cornerstone investments through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And, we've announced, 5 hydrogen hubs have been successfully negotiated. So those are out in the public sphere that you can look at. Adrienne is right that, aviation is not as forefront in the hubs as some other applications. But I will also tell you that, the hub activity is very focused on commercialization, really trying to have a catalytic investment. The head of the infrastructure department, DOE, David Crane, often says, this is an investment where we're asking, no return or return of capital, but we want to be catalytic and unlock future capital in the space of hydrogen. And so, as these are long-term projects, like as they grow, things can change. Like consistency in life is change, and it's going to take place in the market. And right, so the application that's going to demand the highest price for hydrogen is going to offtake it and going to get it. So things can change through the life cycle, but I think it has to all be viewed through the lens of the market and through the readiness in terms of technology, and also through the readiness in terms of certification. So all those things have to come together. But there is going to be hydrogen there. We have now also some certainty to plan around, right? You can look at it on a map, where these investments are. And they're really looking to ramp up production and access to hydrogen in the United States that makes us a leader in that space. So, lot many people know it, but the United States actually makes 10 million metric tons of hydrogen per year. It just never really leaves the fence line of most refineries. We're trying to make millions of metric tons available for other applications like long haul trucking, like long duration energy storage, steel production, fertilizer production, and maybe even a little bit of aviation. I'll pass it over to Catalin and see if he has any other thoughts on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. I may not talk about hydrogen in particular, because I think hydrogen will be part of the picture. But what I really feel excited about is I think we are at an inflection point in aviation. Like in my entire career, I haven't seen a time when so many new technologies are being discussed, tried, and experimented upon. We used to improve over the last 20, 30 years, engines in aircraft at about 1 to 2% per year, 1% engines, 2% aircraft. And you go now and you hear the talk is, we've already done 15 to 16% in one step with the LEAP engines and the new aircraft and with the geared turbofan. And now we're talking about another 20%. Is it going to happen? I don't know. But it's just from a combination. It's not just from open rotor or hybridization or SAF or advanced ceramics, but it's an extraordinary time to be in aviation. And in terms of hydrogen, the extraordinary place that I would like to be if I was not at the FAA, because I'm having fun at the FAA, would be with one of these startups. I visited recently a few of them, and they're even on the panel or hosting us. And I'm absolutely fascinated with the energy, the can-do attitude, the youth of their ideas, the let's try something. In big industry, we are sometimes beholden to what's called standard work, which delivers results, incremental results, predictable results, but it also takes forever and costs a ton. It was so refreshing to see people, trying the new cathode and then the next day going to test it for thermal runaway of that battery. And maybe next week they'll put it on a flight. Something that would have taken us years to do in normal industry. So this excitement that, yes, it is on the wings of hydrogen for the startups, it is the most extraordinary story that I have seen in my life. It's worth living through.
If I can build on and pair it once again, I know there are a lot of founders on here and innovators in industry that are living Catalin's last remarks, but when the current administrator rolled out the operating rules for my all-electric side, he wrote this, and I think it mirrors that. Our work reflects one of my maxims: always put safety first, but support innovation to the maximum degree possible. And innovation is upending traditional aviation norms and assumption at an unprecedented speed, which makes this, from my perspective as FAA administrator, the most exciting time in aviation history. And I think that's the electric side. And once hydrogen gets even bigger and bolder, you'll see that level of excitement run through and all the way up and down both these men's agencies in the years to come. But we have to work together to do that and show the potential.
That's so great. I was working on another story and had a conversation with the aviation historian from the Smithsonian, and he said something similar, which is he is just completely blown away by the amount and the speed of the innovation. He just said it's unbelievable to him. When you consider, I know in those same remarks, Administrator Whitaker talked about, the last time they certified a new, right, was 80 years ago, right? And that was the helicopter. And it's just, I think that's such a great thing. Do if you want to push forward in this area, actually, we do have a question from the audience, and the lucky winner is Catalin. And this person's question is, given the many projects with different certification approaches, MOCs, eVTOLs, how can you ensure sufficient support to each applicant? I don't know if that falls in your basket, but thought I'd ask.
Well, the good news is, for the time being, there are not that many. So we do have the manpower to address them. But I am concerned if there's a wave building of applicants that, yes, we will, I believe we will need help. Everybody's looking for talent, and everybody's looking for talent with experience, especially at the FAA. And I think we need to be looking now in order to be responsive to this uptick in demand. What I can tell you now is that the sooner you start, the sooner we start talking, the better it is. And I think both Joby and ZeroAvia know that, because we discover things together. This isn't somewhere where we have the book on it. We don't. The FAA only certifies 3 things: engines. I learned this much: engines, propellers, and aircraft. It don't certify fuel cells. It doesn't certify power plants. Okay, so, but we do certify it in the end. We have to work through special conditions, and we will bring items from 23, from 33, from 25, and 33, and so forth. But keep in mind also that what I said earlier, that things are very much in flux. Technology options have not been decided yet. People are looking at cryogenic, all sorts of things, right? Cooling, condensing water in the exhaust and re-injecting it in the combustor, cooling, supercooling electric motors. Some of these will have implications on how things are installed, how they will function on aircraft, how they will provide safety. Are we going to put everything under a nacelle, or we put the fuel tanks somewhere in the fuselage, or maybe outside? How will the first responders respond if there's an hydrogen aircraft coming to land? There will be questions to all of this, but some of them we don't even know what the options are. So it will be a learning process on both sides. The sooner we talk, the better. We start talking, and I think we're going to get there.
That's so exciting. I'm torn because I knew we had 2 questions we wanted to get to. I know that we were interested in talking about the global competition out there, where the U.S. stands. I know we had a poll question asking where they thought the U.S. would fall in terms of hydrogen aviation. Any thoughts on global competition? What the U.S. needs to do to stay on the cutting edge, be on the cutting edge?
So many thoughts, but I've always gone first. So gentlemen, either of you want to go first?
I guess I'll try to kind of combine 2 of the thoughts we were also talking about. So from the historical perspective, the United States has always been a leader in aviation, looking at, the Wright brothers. And what a lot of people don't realize about the Kitty Hawk flight is one of the major innovation was actually in propulsion technology and lightweight propulsion. It had an aluminum water-cooled engine. So we need to continue on that sort of, tradition and pioneer the new forms of propulsion. So that's sort of like my perspective. I think we need to keep the momentum up, that exciting energy that we see in the innovation space.
I agree. I think that the work that Catalin is doing right now is setting a policy framework and a roadmap. And I think the question that one of our attendees asked about sufficient support. We have a workforce shortage at the FAA on a lot of things. They are stretched with MAX issues and so many others. As a new entrant, I feel like the FAA is doing a great job trying to help us along the path. And, if you have a really transparent conversation as a founder or an innovator and you're helping along that process from policy to cert, I think they do a decent job of staffing as much as they can to help you along that timeline. And at least that's what we felt in the eVTOL side, on the Joby side, and what we're hopeful for on the hydrogen side. The challenge is that American innovation has moved pretty fast in the software space, where ROI and returns are easy. In the hardware space, it's harder. In the aviation space, it's 500 times harder. And that's where the US government and industry innovators really need to be partnering, because the pathways to get all new technology certified is so much harder than those that are looking for STCs or modifying existing aircraft. But the innovation we're seeing across the globe, especially what we're seeing coming out of China, is whole new aircraft, whole new designs, whole new powertrains, and the certification limitations are not guiding the product and design. And I believe that the reason Americans aviation leads the globe is our safety standard. And I think we can continue that safety standard and embolden innovation from the smallest component to the full aircraft. And I think hydrogen requires that. I mean, there's wonderful work being done by many of you to transform existing aircraft to have hydrogen powertrains, but hydrogen is a finicky molecule. It is a big molecule. It is different. And we're going to have to at scale, go to those bigger dreams that Ben and Catalin were talking about, be able to think about new aircraft or new design. And that might start with small things like the rotorcrafts I love, but might need us to look at bigger ones too.
I mean, I think you may have gathered that I'm a bit of an optimist, and I would share for those of you who haven't read the Economist article recently about the American economy, I would echo the same response there, that the only thing that's standing as an obstacle to our greatness economically is ourselves. So if we choose to not do something, sometimes I think, I'm European by birth. Sometimes it seems to us that Americans do everything wrong until they do the right thing. But then when they do the right thing, they do it fast and they do it ahead of everyone else. Make no mistake, the rest of the world is investing heavily in hydrogen. The European Union put about 400 million euro of their clean aviation program in hydrogen. And they're going to put probably another amount like that in phase 2 of clean aviation. And that's doubled that in their regional and national programs. China is also investing in this area. But the place where the United States is safe, I think, is this innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. So if we help it on the government side, with some investment in research, with making sure that we have streamlined certification, that we don't put barriers, we don't need to be a fast follower or a slow follower. We can be a leader in this area as well.
I think that is a wonderful note. We are right up against time. So I think I'll throw it over to Dominic. Dominic?
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, everybody. Again, a superb panel. Really interesting. I was struck by the positivity coming from all panelists in the passion for what an exciting time, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's electrification, whether it's ultra efficient engines. What an exciting time to be in aviation. Step changes in so many different areas. We're obviously talking a lot about hydrogen here, but that sentiment's fantastic. It's bliss it was in that dawn to be alive.